Have a nice Labor Day. Today I'd like to talk a little bit about the history of the labor movement in the United States. At the end of the 1890s and 1880s, it was very clear that the gigantic expansion of the American Industrial Revolution was not being matched by any commensurate improvement in the lives of the working men and women who fueled it. And that the major monopolies and trusts felt no obligation to increase wages to their workers as their profits increased. And that led to the formulation of the AFL, the American Federation of Labor, which was a union movement based largely on crafts, not on heavy industry, carpenters, electricians, bricklayers, that kind of thing. And they fought vigorously for recognition in the teens, the 20s, and into the early 30s. During the teens and the first years of the century, they were increasingly effective, particularly under President Theodore Roosevelt, who largely sided with them. But by the 1920s, prosperity in the United States undermined their power, and the bosses, employers, fought back with injunctions blocking virtually any strike or other form of protest. In 1932, oddly enough, President Hoover, signed the Norris-LaGuardia Act, sponsored by two Republicans, which made injunctions to stop strikes illegal and basically gave unions the right to strike. The courts, that was subsequently encoded in the National Recovery Act that FDR passed. That was ruled unconstitutional by the courts. It was replaced by the Wagner Act that gave unions that power, and that has been sustained ever since. Unions were especially powerful in the aftermath of World War II, with hundreds and thousands of work stoppages across key industries to make sure that the profits that had accumulated in the after-war era, when pent-up consumer demand was buying everything, would filter down to the working person. In 1947, Congress passed the Taft-Hartley Act, which empowered the government to seize strikers, and not to seize strikers, to interrupt strikes, and to require a 90-day cooling-off period and compulsory mediation before the strike could resume. And that served to reduce the number of strikes significantly. But the real blow to unionization in the United States was foreign competition. When we developed a largely open trade policy with the rest of the world, it became clear that U.S. labor could not compete, and industry throughout the world put American unionized businesses out of work. Interestingly enough, non-union manufacturing business has continued to thrive in the United States. It's only unionized workers that have been thrown out of existence. And along with this, the number of work stoppages has declined dramatically, from about 300 in 1980 to about 150 in 1990 to 11 during 2010. But as that and the percentage of the workforce in unions fell from a third in 1946 to about 5% in private sector unions today. But the real change was in public sector unions, which began to develop momentum in the 60s and 70s, led by the teachers' union. And here the union realized that it could acquire political power over the management, who were, after all, elected officials, and it could basically populate both sides of the bargaining table. And municipal unions have grown in power ever since, until they now control about 43% of the local labor force and about 20% of the state labor forces throughout the country, particularly in areas like healthcare and teaching and construction. Now, those efforts were largely triggered a huge backlash in 2012 when Governor Scott Walker of Wisconsin passed legislation stopping teachers' unions from bargaining over anything other than wages and hours and working conditions. They were not allowed to bargain for tenure or for pay based on seniority as opposed to merit or over work rules. And that crippled the power of unions in Wisconsin. And many other states have rushed into that breach to enact laws of their own, both right-to-work laws, which break the power of unions to force people to join unions, passed in Michigan, The U.S. Supreme Court in Harris v. Quinn this year stopped unions from forcing contract employees who work for the government to join labor unions, and many other states are considering reforms on the ilk of what Walker pioneered in Wisconsin. So this is a challenging time in which we, on the horizon, can see the demise of public sector unions as well. Unions remain powerful in two areas, and will be. First of all, they have large money to donate to parties because of their dues and their accumulated wealth. And secondly, they run pension funds that are huge and have a great deal of power with their investment capability. But unions are increasingly becoming pension funds with PACs, not genuine organizations representing the workers. Thanks for watching.